Good afternoon and welcome. This is a special meeting of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force called for Thursday, March 17, 2011 at 5 p.m. and beginning at 5:06 p.m. Roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Member Snyder? Snyder absent. Member Nee?
Here.
Nee present. Member Cawthon? Cawthon excused. Member Manny? Manny excused. Member Washburn?
Here.
Washburn present. Member Knebber? Knebber absent. Member Costa?
Here.
Costa present. Member Wolf?
Here.
Wolf present. Member Chan? Chan absent. Member Johnson?
Here.
Johnson present. Member West?
Here.
West present. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, could you read the first item, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The first item is consideration of amendments to the Sunshine Ordinance.
Okay. Just for openers and particularly to explain what our process is to our new members whom we'd like to welcome. At our previous special meeting dealing with amendments to the Sunshine Ordinance, rather than starting from square one and going through the whole ordinance, what we decided to do was to ask each member to submit in advance a list of the 5 or 6 issues relating to Sunshine that he or she felt were the most important, the most urgent to be addressed, and to suggest whatever solutions he or she had. We had a couple of people submit in time to be included in the information packet that goes along with the agenda. And then we've also had an additional submission within the last few days from Member Washburn. I'd like to ask our other 3 members, Mr. Wolf, Mr. Costa, Mr. West, if you have had a chance to do any thinking about this, and if you have any written supplements to add to our package at this time.
Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to review the materials, so at this time, I probably wouldn't want to weigh in.
Okay, Member Costa?
I have had the chance to review some of the key changes. I don't have a written summary, but I do have some thoughts.
Okay.
I don't know what the proper sort of.
Well, as you'll see it as we progress, as we proceed here.
Okay.
Member Wells.
Some of my items were already addressed by both yourself and Member Washburn, so we'll continue with those so we can get through something today.
Okay.
And then, because we'll probably have at least 1 or 2 more meetings, I suppose, on this.
Okay. Well, let me just ask each of you, right off the top of your head, you think there are any issues that you would like to see addressed. Member West?
Yeah, off the top of my head, so 12 months ago when I originally applied, had you asked me off the top of my head, I could have given you a number of answers.
Okay.
In the meantime, I'll have to get caught back up myself.
All right.
And make sure some of those issues hadn't been addressed. Because obviously
Okay.
I don't want to cast aspersion on elements that have already been changed or new policies that have been instituted. So I'm hoping towards the question time to figure out the best way to ask the members of the task force essentially how to catch up on those issues.
Okay.
As for the changes that have been presented by the other members of the task force, essentially if I don't know if we have time at this meeting to point out the most significant changes, or essentially if I could just ask for more time to review the changes that have been suggested. Otherwise, I'd be happy to recuse myself from this round of recommendations.
Well, no,
There's no need for that.
recusal will not be necessary, and as a matter of fact, will not be accepted. You are a member of the task force now.
No, I'm happy.
And,
I'm happy to contribute. I just don't want to slow down the process.
Understand.
Because I haven't had time to review the material.
Okay, understand. Member Costa?
One of the things that I think is most pressing is the section 67.39C, which is added language clarifying responsibilities of respondent agencies, basically to show up at hearings. It seems to me like based on the couple of meetings that I've observed, that's an issue that is a big one for us. So I would love to see that, get some attention. I think also having a central repository of information is an issue that I would like to prioritize. I also saw in the comments of the city attorney, looks like there was some confusion about whether that was a physical repository or just an electronic repository.
I can give you some light on that if you want to address that now, I can, or not.
Well, we can address it. Do you have any other issues, Member Costa?
Well, in general, it seemed, I don't know, it would be helpful to hear sort of where we're at in terms of the points that the attorney addressed, because it seems like those might be some sticking points to getting, whether or not there's things that we are prioritizing. There are things that seem like they might prevent, a larger piece of work that we're submitting from getting adopted. So it seems like that, I don't know if you've already talked about this, but if you haven't, like maybe talk through how we're going to address the concerns raised by the city attorney. And that's what I'd say.
Okay. I would think that as we move forward on each item, we bring the city attorney's concerns in on as we go along.
Okay.
We address the city's attorney's concern specific to that item.
Terrific.
Okay?
It's one other. This is sort of an out there idea, but something that's like not even included in this, in what has been suggested so far. But if there were to be a central repository, an electronic central repository, it would be really cool to make it possible to sort of sign up for RSS like updates, like anytime something was posted, and then maybe even implement some sort of email update system so that you can sign up for different commissions or agencies. Whenever something has happened, people will get notified rather than having to go searching for it. I don't know.
Okay. Member Wolf?
I would say 6721E, which we've had a lot of discussion about. And also, I want to kind of have also maybe another short discussion about the use and the change of status to commission, considering our, what our discussion that happened at the Rules Committee, and I just want to kind of brainstorm a little bit, ask a couple of questions, and brainstorm about that a little bit.
Okay. There are, I think, some areas here of common concern among those of us who have filed statements in advance. Specifically, I think the whole question of attendance of respondents complaint respondents at task force hearings, and particularly, of course, the respondents to complaints regarding open meeting violations rather than public records violations. We've had some. We've had a couple. Well, there are a couple of ways we can go on this. The Section 67.39C is one way. And then section, we could also, as I've suggested, add a section 67.18 under Article 2. It pretty much mirrors section, what we have in 67.21E, But 67.21E is part of Article 3, which deals with public records. And if we lump both, the requirements for both, under 67.21E, it's too easy for respondents in public meeting or open meeting matters to say, well, it's not in the open meeting section, so I missed it, so I really had no way of knowing that this was the law. 67.18, adding a 67.18 is one way to go about this, because it would be specifically in Article 2, the open meeting section. The other is adding, is 67.39C, is that an existing, or would that be a new?
No, that's a new one that was.
It would be new. So we would add the language. Okay.
And it applies in both cases, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it does, definitely. Yeah,
do you
definitely.
do you have actually specific language that you want to propose, Member Washburn?
I'm going from what was proposed originally in the first round of amendments that came out of the complaints and amendments before last spring. And when Erica Craven Green was chairing that committee. So this, what I have on my memo is what was suggested be added, a whole new section, and it refers specifically to both.
Okay.
Although I could see having in Article 2 and in Article 3, having language particular to each, separately. Have that redundancy, but the language for 6739C is, does the trick, in my opinion.
Member Johnson.
When I made my suggestions, one of the things that we hadn't decided yet was whether or not we were going to go with just 4 or 5 issues or use the former. There's a number of problems I have with the totality of the former amendments that were suggested. But for example, if we did not use those, it wouldn't end up being 67.39C because the numbering is based on some added language.
Right.
So then it would be the 6718. So it would be helpful if we worked on it one way or the other. Do you see what I'm saying? If we made a decision that maybe we would choose to add language, for example, what you said, 6718, and then if we decide to adopt more of the changes, we could then use that new numbering. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. One thing about adding a 67.39C is that it would make the language, the relevant language in 67.21E unnecessary. We could delete that. So there are really 2 ways to go about this. Delete that portion at the bottom of 67.21E and add 67.39C. That's one way. The other way is to leave 67.21E as is, maybe even separate it out, put it in a new 67.21F, just to.
It already is in F.
Well, that would mean moving the others down. F would become
Right.
G, G would become H, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I have heard complaints also that because 67.21E right now is rather lengthy, that particular portion on requiring the attendance of complaint respondents tends to get lost in there. And it's possibly a reason that some respondents don't know it's there and don't realize that they're responsible for showing up here when we have a hearing. So that's Member Johnson.
And right on that point that you were talking about, that is one of the problems that I have with the formerly amended suggestions, that putting it all at the end makes it hard to find. So if you were going to put it before the voters, I would suggest putting it, leaving 6721E or dividing it under public records and putting the new provision as you suggested along with the meetings so that they're enumerated when people are reading about it rather than accounting on them going all the way to the end about our hearings.
Without necessarily a formal motion on this, it might be a good idea to get kind of a consensus on which approach would be preferable, the 67.18 or 67.39C. Member Washburn.
Now that I've thought about it, I think it would, I agree with Member Johnson that I think it would be a good idea to have this in both places, in the public meetings article and then in public records article. But I also said that we could have something like under policy implementation, it could be there as well. We could have that redundancy.
Okay.
But I think it would be more helpful to people who are attempting to comply with the law and to have it specifically under the appropriate article.
Okay, and what about the question, if we decide to leave the language of 67.21E intact, do we want to put that part, that bottom part about attendance, an attendance requirement? Do we want to separate that out and make a new 67.21F?
I think we should, yeah. It's a big deal, obviously, and I think it should be, have its own item and be prominent.
I have a question.
Member Wolf.
6718 in the edited version is supervisor of public forums. Is that what you were referring to?
No.
Okay.
This
You're
would.
talking about in the
I'm talking
current.
about adding, starting with the current sunshine ordinance
Right.
and adding to that a section 67.18.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, there, in our current amendments, there already is a 6718.
But those amendments are not part of the law right now.
Yeah,
And
that's
we're,
right.
and we're not starting with the current package of amendments.
Okay.
We may incorporate part of those into what we do, but right now, where we're starting is the current sunshine ordinance.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Do all of you have a copy of the section 67.18 that I have suggested here, and is there anything, do you find that acceptable? Do the members find that acceptable, or is there something that should be added, deleted, or revised therefrom?
I'm sorry. I feel like I'm all over the place here. I need a little direction. We're taking 6739C
No.
and making it, or 6721E and making that into 6718.
No, we're not.
6721.
67.21E would remain as is.
As is. Okay.
As is. The proposals that we're weighing are, number one, add 67.18 per the language that I have suggested. That's one option.
Okay.
And leave 67.21E as is. Number two, add 67.39C.
Could I make a suggestion?
In a second. Add 39C, and then we would not need 67.18, and we could also delete that section of 67.21E, which pertains to responsibility of respondents' attendance. Another option is add 67.18, add 6739C, from the language in the amendments package, and leave 67.21E as is, or at least leave that language intact and maybe separate it out into a
Yes,
60
yes.
new
Sorry. My head's spinning.
6739F.
I'm sorry, my head is spinning.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
I like that approach. Yeah, the redundancy and clarity.
Yeah.
Really would.
Sorry. You
Okay.
wanted to.
Member Johnson.
Could we try to come to a consensus on whether we're going to pick 4 or 5 things, and then we can make a decision on how to put them in there? Because part of the problem that's coming up, like for Member Wolf, is he keeps going back to these amendments.
Yeah, that's where to
And
me, I
69
feel like we've done all this work already, and there's so much good stuff in the amendments, like subpoena power. That needs to be in the new ordinance.
We might have to discuss some of that if we include that, but that's a separate discussion. But if we picked 4 or 5 things that we agreed on, it would be easier to determine whether or not we use all of the amendments. So maybe since we seem to have, maybe we could vote on if we include that and then go back and figure out how to insert the issues that we want, so that we would then not be, because what's happening now is he's trying to decide if he wants the amendment at the same time he's trying to decide if he wants how he wants to change that. So I think that's confusing, because you're holding 2 concepts in your head with the amendments, but we do seem to have consensus that we want to include that change. So that would be one, and then we could try to figure out what the others are, and it would help us decide if a number of them fit into the changes you guys had originally done, then it might easily fit into one slot or the other. Each change. Because that's a huge change, that 6939. Removing all of the hearing issues and putting them at the end is a really big change relative to just adding the public meetings to the requirement.
Okay. We've already heard then from Member Costa. We have heard from Member Johnson, Member Washburn, Member Costa, as to what issues we want to approach in amending the ordinance. Okay. Member Wolf, I will ask you again. Give us an idea of the issues that you think are most important to address.
So again, my most important issues of the current or of the amendments? We're not using the
Well,
amendments, so of the
both.
current?
Both.
We're going to, both, okay.
Now,
So,
what I wanted to do here was get each member of the task force to submit a list of the 4 or 5 or 6 sunshine-related issues
right,
that need to be addressed most urgently, regardless of whether they're in the current ordinance or the
Okay,
amendments.
So just
What are the
conceptually-
issues that would need addressing, and how should those issues be remedied?
Okay, so 6721E for me, that needs to be broken up into like 2 or 3 separate paragraphs, because it's too conflated as one. There are too many issues going on in there that are independent of each other. So that's the first thing. So it could be under one paragraph, but there needs to be some sub-paragraphs if it remains to be inclusive. Second one is discussing the change from task force to commission. Third one is subpoena power. And I'm going to stop there because the other ones that came up from Member Johnson and Member Washburn, I'll take any one of those. And yourself, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Member Chan, we haven't had a chance to hear from you. Are there any issues that you believe are paramount that we address as we try once again to formulate a package of amendments? What are the top issues you see out there?
My top issues are, there's same thing like what Member Wolf says, commission to task force to commission, and of course the subpoena power, 67.40 administrative enforcement provision, and that's it.
Okay. So, what I see, there is, I think, a consensus on the need to discuss a name change of this body. There is a consensus on the need to discuss subpoena power for the task force. There is consensus on the need to address the responsibility of complaint respondents to attend hearings.
One of mine was broadcast requirements. Is anybody after
What?
rules today?
Broadcast requirements.
Yeah.
I agree on that.
Member Costa brought up the concept of where, how and where documents should be stored. I mean, that kind of falls under the index of records kind of section, I think.
When you guys say central repository, could you clarify if you mean, because
I can clarify. The city is going to go in a major transformation of its central data network. It's putting almost everything into kind of a central data center of which everybody will be able to access all the information. So there's not a lot of duplication, and that the city can keep track of all documents that are coming and going. Right now, they're sitting in closets.
is this associated with Supervisor Mercarimi's centralized posting place, or is this totally
And-
different?
No, it's a little different. That centralized posting is more of a public bulletin board kind of thing. This is more about the actual documents and a place where the general public can go and search for the documents instead of having to.
Is this a guaranteed thing or something you're trying to have put forward?
As Member Nee can also attest, he and I have been attending the Committee on IT, and this is where we inject ourselves to make sure that Sunshine is included as part of whatever plan they are using to consolidate. And so it's a big, big project that's been ongoing for almost 2 years now. So the idea here is now they picked a provider, a vendor. They've used Microsoft. So they're probably going to end up using SharePoint, which is a fairly easy-to-use way for document management. And
Is it something that they're going to have to vote on, or is it
No.
something that is going to be in effect?
No, this is already paid for. The only thing they'll be voting on is the contracts. But once those recommendations come, the Department of Technology's done all the vetting, the RFPs, and that kind of stuff. So
So it would not be, if we were to include it in our amendments, it would not be something we were creating,
No.
asking them to create. It would
No.
be, we'd be linking on to something that's going on already.
Well, one of the things that we would be doing is requiring the city to make this available to the public. It's already available within the technology that they're looking to use. And the Microsoft folks have already contacted me about, we want to talk to you about the Sunshine stuff.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
so there is a commitment to do it. The question is how far are they willing to go? And we're shooting for the universe. Okay, and we won't stop. We want everything.
Understand. Thank you.
Okay.
And I think also Board President Chu is on the Committee on Committee on Information Technology. And one of the things that he continually reminds them is that there are also budgetary considerations in this. They're going to, whatever they want to do, they may have to fight for the money, but just because of the city's budget is stretched so thin. So, but I think we have, both Member Wolf and I have made it very clear to the Committee to COIT, as it's called, and to the Department of Technology, that we hope that they will use this task force as a resource when it comes to making sure that the system will enable sunshine compliance. You know, we want to help them toward that goal, and we want to work with them, you know, as in a cooperative vein. Member Wolf?
Yeah, to his credit, President Chu, who is the representative from the supervisors to this committee. Now, this is an interdepartmental committee. This is one of the few committees where you get all department heads, all the bigwigs sitting at the table, and they're all concerned. You know, Department of Health is there, and Department of Public Works, and the police department is there, even though they have their own kind of network. It's really intense, and it's a very slow-moving process. But to his credit, the Supervisor Chu is dedicated to make sure that that the ability for Sunshine to exist within this network is had, so that he's like, from the way he described it, at least one of the meetings I was there, I don't think a member Nee was there, was that he wanted to make sure that the public had an easy access to documents so that they don't have to keep on complaining about getting them.
He's on board with that?
Sorry?
He's on board with that?
Yes, he is.
More than on Hank?
Yeah, I mean, the less amount of interface the public has to have in asking for documents, the better. That's basically the
My only
crux of
concern
it.
was I didn't want to, since we're trying to get something pushed through, I didn't want to create too many things that were not
Yeah.
in the works. But if it's in the works, I think that what you're saying is a good idea to have it, you know, in the law. But I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure it was something that was already being discussed, because we've had issues with the index to records
I understand.
before.
My concern is just in the future, if something happens and they decide they don't want to do it anymore, the thing is to have it in the law.
Yeah.
So that way it's required. But you make
Okay.
it as general broad and let them deal with the nuts and bolts.
Like index to records.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, now there are a couple of things.
I think Member
Oh, and I
West.
would just
Member
say
West?
that once the system is implemented, it would be about suggesting amendments that made sure that essentially the means of accessing it were, sorry, I thought I had something smarter to say, but
But say it will glean from.
configuration options and things like that.
Microphone.
My question is essentially making sure that the people setting up the system stay on board with making sure that everything that can be opened from a technological standpoint is.
Yeah.
So future amendments would, not to be discussed here, but once the system is in place, I think would be something to watch out for there.
Yeah, I think the best way to do that is to make a blanket statement, something like, you know, all documents should be made, all documents are public, and they
Right.
should all be made available in every means and medium and format.
Okay.
Okay, and you create that big umbrella, and then whatever the nuts and bolts to make that happen, I mean, you could put whatever details you want. Like, it should be searchable. There should be a way to get a link to get consistent updates on certain legislation per se, or something like that. We can go through those matters. But at the same time, if we create that umbrella,
Okay.
the supervisors can create little subsections that fit in there.
Yep.
That will apply because they then have the authority under the big umbrella. So that's a way to do that. Kind of like what Supervisor Mercarimi did with saying there should be a central web bulletin board for everything that should be public. So it's the same kind of thing.
Right now, we have 5 items that we want to discuss. Let me just ask, there are some things not on this list of 5 that have been put forward by Member Johnson or myself. Number 1, electronic records withholding and reformatting, the whole question of metadata. I think that that should be that should be addressed, and I have proposed some language for 67.21L. Also, is that something that is that something we should go forward with or not?
So after having reviewed the topics of discussion, this has been a huge pet peeve of mine for years and years and years. I think we should go forward with it.
Okay.
My questions are essentially, I feel that the latter items dealing with fines, respondents' attendance, and an independent attorney for the office would probably pay more dividends in terms of advancing the other issue items in the long run. So, so I'm suggesting, so I'm essentially trying to say, I certainly support the electronic records withholding and reformatting item. My questions are, what of this collection of items do we feel has the best chance of passing?
Well, that'll be, as we move forward, we can discuss that also. Meeting minutes. The whole question of detailed minutes versus action minutes. Is that something we want to
Yes.
discuss?
Isn't that already
Yes.
in there?
Absolutely.
No, we definitely need to discuss that one.
Member Costa, do you have something you wanted to say?
I actually just wanted to jump back to electronic records withholding and reformatting really quickly. I just wanted to get some clarification on exactly what the sorry. go ahead.
For instance, if you want to see an electronic record, say, that was originally produced in Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, and the person behind the counter says, well, we're going to give it to you in as a PDF.
Right.
And you say, well, I have a right to see it in Microsoft Excel, and the person behind the counter says, well, we have it on city attorney's advice that we can give it to you in PDF, and that we don't have to give it to you in Excel.
Are all of those PDF documents searchable currently? No.
Now, if I can give a little background on that?
Look, just
Okay.
the question, do we want that
Oh.
to be a part of our discussions going forward?
I would
Do we
say-
want to address that?
To me, that's an important issue.
Yeah. I would
Okay,
say
member Washburn?
There's one that I suggested that's kind of related about requiring the transfer of paper records to electronic format upon request. So it speaks to the idea of people getting information in the form that they could best use it.
And that would also include archival records as well as sort of contemporary records.
Right.
That's a little bit different, I think, but we can certainly paper to electronic.
And would we be in a position to ask that any effort be made to then translate any text into that document into searchable text, i.e. using optical character recognition software or some software that, renders typed text on a paper document into something that can be
Well,
then be searched?
we could make that a requirement if we want to insert language to that effect, yes.
Yeah, that's-
Okay.
sorry.
Fines and penalties for violations. This is, do we want to add a section on fines and penalties for violations? We don't have, the task force does not have the authority to impose them, but the task force certainly has the authority to recommend to enforcement bodies that they be imposed. Is this something that is high priority enough to my way of thinking it is, because when we refer a matter to the Ethics Commission, one of their criticisms has been, well, what do you want us to do about it? There is nothing in the ordinance or anywhere else that suggests what kind of a fine or penalty we should impose, and we seek some guidance from you. They have told us this, as a matter of fact. So, to me, this is something that we should be we should be discussing as part of what we're doing here. Is there agreement on that?
I agree.
Okay. Do we want to discuss the question of whether to empower the task force to hire its own attorney, to hire an
Yes.
outside attorney?
Yes.
All right.
I know it's going to be a huge problem, but, but we can discuss it.
We can discuss
We
it.
like
Yeah,
those kinds of
and
problems.
Per my
Well, it's
discussion
not that, it's-
earlier, I mean,
I'm sorry.
my experience watching the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force over the last few years has been that it's difficult to move the agenda forward without some sort of independent power from, the rest of city government.
Okay, so this is going to be on the agenda then. Disclosability of responses to requests for qualifications, bids, et cetera. Is this something that's high enough priority that we want to discuss this?
I-
Member Johnson?
I mean, it was one of the ones I had on there, and I think even if we don't change it extensively, we at least have to address the idea that when the original task force was set up, the original ordinance was set up, they made the assumption that RFQs would precede RFPs. And as Nick Kinsey from Rec and Park told us many times, they now use RFQs interchangeably or to completely substitute for RFPs. And we really have to address that because it's come up a number of times. So even if we don't do an extensive
Yeah.
revision, I think we should at least discuss addressing it.
Okay.
I agree.
And Member Johnson had also suggested some certain definition updates. Is this something we wanted to bring in as on our top priority list?
Definition.
Well, when Member Cawthon's Library Commission report was issued from the Ethics Commission, they said that file and complaint were not defined in the ordinance, and so they defined them on their own. We need to define a couple of things that are not addressed. They also said it in their the Ethics Commission did in their new regulations addressing sunshine. They don't file in the provision that was added under Prop G that says that any person may file a complaint. The one about they can file it with a regular agency, whatever. I don't have my.
Okay. And then also, Member Washburn had proposed added language on 67.26. Added language would establish requirement that all withholdings of documents or information be based on an express provision of the ordinance or an express exemption in the California Public Records Act, the use of which is not barred by the ordinance. What would that change, Member Washburn? What's the change there that you're envisioning?
That was one of the suggested amendments originally.
Okay.
And so I'm not changing anything. I'm just saying I agree with that proposed amendment from before.
Okay.
I think it's important that when there is withholding, well, the two kind of go together in my mind, 67.26, 67.21E, that if documents or information is going to be withheld, then it has to have a express provision cited. The basis for withholding has to be clearly cited, and that the withheld information has to be described in such a way that the person asking for the information at least knows what's being withheld. It makes the black box a little less black.
Okay. Agreed that we should discuss this?
Yeah.
Okay, and okay, so that's 6726 and 6728E both. That kind of under the same, lumped into the same category.
Right, and those are the amended. I was working from the list that you prepared
Uh-huh.
before, so
Okay.
Those aren't the
Okay.
existing.
We now have 1, 2,
sections.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 items. That's plenty. It's unfortunate that other members are absent, but we have certainly enough on our plate. There is one, I believe, one person in the audience. Sir, if you would care to approach the microphone, you have been listening to what we have down here in terms of what we consider the top priority items. Are there any items that you feel need to be added to that list?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to comment. In looking at the new amendments, I'm a little troubled by the 6718, Supervisor of Public Forums. It appears that it's a delegation of the task force's responsibility of determining public bodies and passive bodies, turning it over to the district, the city attorney. I'd like to see some discussion on that issue. Another matter, although I will say I do like the priorities that I've heard so far, the Mercury legislation, I'm not sure if it passed yet or if it even came in front of the task force, but it appears to be less open government by moving the agenda items to a website. I'm troubled by that because it's really not telling the public what's on the agenda that's going to be heard for public comment. So I'd like to see some discussion about that. I don't know if the Mercury legislation is passed or is pending, or even if it was discussed with the task force, but I'm troubled by that legislation. But I do like the idea of subpoena powers, the task force having subpoena powers. I do like the idea of the task force having the ability to levy penalties. Then you wouldn't need to go to the Ethics Commission if you could issue penalties for you find a violation.
Well, no, we cannot issue penalties. We could possibly pass create language giving us the power to penalize.
Yeah, that was my
but-
suggestion.
Okay.
And the issue of compelling attendance by respondents seems to be a long-term problem with the task force. But overall, I like your priorities. But I am concerned about the issue of the supervisor of public forums. It seems to be given your duty, responsibility.
Okay, that's not part of the current ordinance. That's, I believe, in the package of amendments that we
Yeah.
discussed through the spring of last year.
Well-
And so it's, unless we, it's a non-issue unless we decide to make it an issue, because right now it's not in the ordinance.
Well, it's in the packet that I received.
Okay, but
as a 6718 as a proposed amendment to your present ordinance.
Okay, this was in a package, part of a package that was abandoned last year, almost a year ago, because we just couldn't get it completed, get the entire package completed in time. So that packet of amendments, they are not the law. And they are not, right now, they are not even ticketed for the ballot, okay? What we're doing here is kind of going back to square one, and instead of, the thinking is, instead of taking a voluminous packet, such as was proposed, we take a handful of amendments, because it will be much easier that way to get voter understanding of what we're proposing.
No, I agree with that. I agree
Okay.
with that.
And in terms of the Mercury amendment on agenda posting, I believe that passed the board several weeks ago.
That's what I was afraid of.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but that's troubling to me because it's going to be less transparency as to what is on the agenda. The legislation, I mean, the old legislation talked about, having an agenda so that reasonable, average, intelligent people would know what they're talking about. That's all been deleted now, and it's just making reference to referring to the appropriate government website will tell you what's on the agenda. I think that's going to cause problems, but perhaps there's another time for that discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Should we take the items in the order that in which we listed them? Well, we had started discussion before on the question of complaint respondent attendance. However, we can put that off for the time being if that's the will of the task force. Member Johnson?
I think the easiest one to address, and maybe one that will have a little bit of a philosophical discussion on, is the change of the name.
Okay.
It just, one of the reasons why I think that it's a good idea is, number one, it was already done throughout the ordinance when you guys did the original amendments, so we do have that. They already went through it, but also I just think that it's a little bit, I understand that Chair Nee's discussion of it had he wasn't sure whether it would garner more respect, but I think that for a couple of reasons. I think commission sounds more formal. I think we have a problem with people taking us seriously, and I think that if we were considered commissioners, it would also evoke, it's a term of respect that is used around City Hall, and I think it would help when we have a lot of people that come through here, especially the police department, places like that.
Okay. Why don't we just take the discussion from here on? We have kind of a chronological order here. Name change, subpoena power, complaint respondent attendance, broadcast requirements, document storage, electronic records reformatting, meeting minutes, paper to electronic records reproduction, outside attorney hiring, request response to disclosability, definitions, and records withholding, clearly defining the provision under which records are withheld. We take it in that chronology. Without objection? Okay. Let us then proceed to the name change question. Member Johnson has already voiced her opinion. I have, I think, voiced my own opinion in the document that I sent. Member Wolf.
My concern about changing it from task force to commission, it became clear to me when thinking about under what section of law we fall under. The question becomes, does our status as the way the task force and the ordinance was created, does that change the entire status? So if it were to, if we were to make claim that the task force lives not in the administrative code, for instance, if we change the name from task force to commission, does that automatically put us under the administrative code?
We are under the administrative
You
code.
mean what it
No,
should?
we're not under the administrative.
Yes, we are.
We're created by Administrative Code
You mean
67.
executive branch, we're not.
We're not,
you
I'm
mean the
sorry,
charter.
the executive branch, right. If
The
we're not-
charter you're talking
Right,
about.
right. If we're not, if we are not, does the name change where we are located, or, okay, if it doesn't, and it's just simply a name change, I have no further questions. Let's just do it. It's just a question that comes up. I mean,
Well,
you know how things work, you know,
Yeah.
you change your flag and now you're something else, you know.
Okay, Member West, Member Chan, Member Washburn.
I actually just wanted to chime in to excuse myself. I had a prior engagement.
Member West, could you use the microphone, please?
I'm sorry, I just wanted to excuse myself to a prior engagement if possible. I saw that, I hope Mr. Chan would continue the quorum.
Yeah, we have a quorum if you need to excuse yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I just made arrangements even before I knew I was up for an appointment.
Okay,
Also, I have a lot of homework to do.
okay.
So, and I trust that the assembled members will, carry on as I would.
Okay.
So, thank you very much for your time, and I will see everyone at the next meeting.
Okay, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Member Chan, Member Washburn?
I think I've researched a couple of. There is a commission that is under a administrative code. It's called. I know it's somewhere in the Bayview. It's some health. Remember? It's in the section of administrative code, and it's called commission. So I don't think it's any different from this task force.
Okay. Member Washburn?
I feel very strongly that we should be a commission and not a task force. When I was doing my homework to speak on behalf of Mr. Grossman's appointment to the Ethics Commission, I looked on the Board of Supervisors front page, and the Ethics Commission is listed there, and we're listed there as the task force. And, I think we should be, I think the term commission carries more weight than task force. It sounds like a permanent thing. Task force sounds very ad hoc, and that's the way it's used in common language, everyday language. It's an ad hoc sort of thing for a particular discrete effort, and we're not that. We have a permanent role here in the city. But one thing I'm wondering, Chair Nee, is if we're limiting ourselves to 5 or 6 different amendments, and then I wouldn't want to use up one of my votes for this, because
Well,
I think that
we're not necessarily limiting ourselves to 5 or 6 amendments. What I said is each member should list the 5 or 6
okay.
that he feels that are the most important, and then, presumably not everybody's going to have the same 5 or 6. So we have a list of a dozen here. That seems to me to be workable.
Okay. And
we have consensus that we want to deal with all of those.
Okay, yeah. So
Mike?
I strongly feel that we should amend the ordinance to change our name.
Okay. Is this something that really should be top priority with all the other things that we want to address, with all the other issues that need addressing? I agree on the desirability of a name change. I'm just wondering if this is the right time to do it with all the other things that we're going to be putting on the ballot or trying to get on the ballot. Member Washburn.
Well, I think this one, a lot of what we're proposing is fairly complicated to communicate to the Board of Supervisors and to voters. It requires some explanation and some rationale. Some of it's pretty bold. I'm hoping we do things like subpoena power. But changing our name is something very straightforward. We can simply say we're changing our name from Sunshine Task Force to Sunshine Commission. So it's not going to eat up a lot of, language in our, in the ballot, for the ballot simplification committee when
Member
they do their
Johnson.
job.
I would be curious what Member Costa thinks, since you're new, you would have kind of an outside perspective.
I think that it seems like it will sort of go a ways in terms of solidifying the bodies, for lack of a better term right now, since we don't know what we're going to call it. Sort of reputation, I guess, and this sort of its position in the scheme of the city. I think that Member Washburn's comment about it sort of changing the connotation from a more ad hoc committee to a more permanent group, I guess, is a very good one. And I think that, you know, I also agree that it's a very easy sort of change to latch onto. I think that the only concern that I can see is if there's going to be a real sticking point. And I think that it seems as though as long as we're clear that there are no real powers or being wrapped up in the name change, that it truly is just a name change to sort of cement a different kind of idea about the role, you know, the kind of like over time the role that the task force is playing, or, you know, the level of seriousness of our engagement. I don't really see any reason not to just to go for it.
Okay. One consideration is that ordinarily commissions are entirely appointed by the mayor. However, we did research that question, and as long as Section 67.30 remains intact, defining the who appoints the members of this body, that being the case, and our former deputy city attorney Ernest Lorente researched this, and he said that we can in fact change our name to a commission and keep intact the current members of appointing our members.
There are other
The
commissions.
current
that
method
are-
of appointing our members. What's that?
There are other commissions, the Ethics Commission and the Rent Board
Right.
are,
So we would not, by changing our name to a commission, we would not automatically be changing the method of appointment. So I think it's important to note that, and I think there is a consensus among us to put the name change amendment in there. So.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I think that's, okay. Subpoena power. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we go to subpoena power, is there any public comment on the question of a name change?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity for commenting. Yeah, I'm in strong support of you changing the name from task force to commission. Many times from many agencies or commissions, I hear that their thinking is a task force is an advisory body, and then it's an advisory opinion that's given, and it has no effect. So perhaps if you were called a commission, there would be different thinking about your rulings, and I think it would be beneficial for you to change your name. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next sub-item, which would be the question of subpoena power, this time we will invite public comment on matters not on today's agenda. Is there any general public comment?
Okay, first let me welcome the new member, Mr. Costa.
Thank you.
And hope you realize that you have quite a responsibility. The task force is probably the agency that allows open government, access to public records, and transparency. Transparency leads to accountability in government, in my opinion. So welcome, but your responsibility is heavy, and you know I hope you attend more meetings than your predecessors. That being said, I don't know if it's appropriate to talk about the Mercury legislation. Is that on your agenda, or that's not on your agenda?
No, it's not on our agenda.
Okay, I'd like to talk about that. I don't recall there being any discussion of the legislation in front of the task force. Perhaps I'm wrong, maybe I missed it, but Mercury should have discussed that with the task force members. My reading of the legislation is that it's going to decrease access to information, not disclose what's on the agenda, the items, either in front of the Board of Supervisors or whatever, is gonna, the public will have less information, and worse, in many cases, it'll be misleading. So, you know, if anybody on the task force knew about the legislation, I think they should have, had Mikurumi or Zaid come and discuss it with the task force, and at least you could have given him your thoughts on the matter, since you're certainly more experienced in transparency and openness. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Further general public comment? Seeing none, general public comment is closed. Member Wolf?
I just want to respond to the Mr. Pasquale's concern. I've read through that, actually, and it actually just kind of clarifies a place that a specific statement would be made as to where people can go find information on the website. It doesn't really change anything. It basically separates out kind of a sentence that is kind of obscure in a paragraph and kind of makes it more prominent so that it's clear as to where a summary, that a description of a summary would be where people can find further information. I could show you that if you want.
Okay. Let me also respond briefly to your welcome statement to Member Costa. Member Costa comes to us very well recommended. As a matter of fact, he works as a journalist for an outfit called maplight.org. I don't know if you're familiar with that organization. Very good organization. Basically, it follows the money, the political money trails. You want to know which politicians are owned by whom, that's the place to go and find out. Am I right?
That's what we aim for. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We're ready to go now with the discussion of subpoena power. Let me open it by pointing to the language that I have suggested. Number one, and that's in, where are we? On page 6 of our packet at the bottom. No, I'm sorry, where am I? Oh, yes. Actually, yeah, that's as part of the whole issue of complaint respondent attendance. It's kind of a second part of that whole question. Right now, the task force, and this is at the top of our packet, page 5. Right now, the task force is empowered to issue subpoenas when we get authorization from the Board of Supervisors. And what the intent of the language that I am suggesting is to remove that requirement that we obtain Board of Supervisors authorization to issue subpoenas. I would also suggest that we be empowered to place people under oath when they testify. Some people, I'm guessing that some people in City Hall will find this a bit threatening. We can expect some opposition to this from within City Hall. Maybe the city attorney would somehow say that we don't have the authority to do this, but it's something that it's an authority I think we should have. Member Wolf?
Yeah, I agree. I'm just wondering about the term parties in interest. Does that include witnesses? Because witnesses may not be parties of interest, may be parties
It
of interest
says
to us.
party in interest, meaning who's complainant or respondent,
Okay,
and any person claiming knowledge regarding a
knowledge
complaint
regarding-
filed with the task force. That would mean a witness.
well, a person would have to voluntarily claim knowledge.
Well, if somebody is a witness, then he's claiming knowledge. If he's saying, I am a witness to this. If it's a member of the public offering public comment, who is not a party in interest, who is just giving us his opinion, that's not, I don't think that's,
I just in regards to the subpoenas, not regarding to oath. Regards to subpoenas, if you want to request somebody to appear that may possibly have information that we're interested in, but they don't know that they have that information, or they don't know that the information that they know has anything to do with any of our cases. All of a sudden, they get a subpoena to show up.
well, are you suggesting that witnesses should be subject to subpoena?
Absolutely. That if we request their presence. Because we've been in situations before where there have been, for instance, it was the case of the Muni driver, where Mr. Maxwell, where the inspector, it was in question whether the inspector actually provided any documents or not. Had at the first time around, we heard that there was somebody other than the new supervisor who didn't have any of the information. Then in the second round, we could have subpoenaed the inspector and had the inspector come in and describe what he did and what documentation he submitted. And then he would also have been under oath to answer those questions. So that would have really streamlined and cut short then a third meeting and then a compliance and amendments review. So I'm trying to see how best we can streamline what we're doing, and if we're allowed to use subpoenas, the purpose of that would help reduce the amount of time we spend, because then we can compel all this information or people to come forward.
Member Johnson.
When I was looking at this, I'm not sure what the reasoning was, why it originally had the subpoena power go through the Board of Supervisors, but I wondered if this would bring up the issue of whether our investigative files were disclosable, how we have the same issue coming up when we're going over the ethics regulations. We have that there was the disagreement between Mr. Grossman and Member Snyder over whether their investigative files would be disclosable. Mr. Grossman thinks they should be disclosable always, for sunshine complaints, and Member Snyder felt that there were some instances where they would not be. So then would we have to, if we do this, would we then need to address that as well?
File disclosability of files, and that is currently under investigation. Is that what you're saying?
Right, because for example, the employment case, there would be some things in there that would be confidential, but the things that come before us are open to the public.
Mr. Chair.
Member Wolf.
I think what we ended up with that discussion is all documents are public, and if there is content that is not public, it can be redacted. But the document itself is still public, okay? Unless otherwise prohibited by California Public Records Act. Okay, so I think here, that in that case, it's one thing like work product. Okay, we know that, attorneys will hide behind, the city attorney, what have you, will hide behind the work product and say that that's not necessarily public until maybe the case is closed, that kind of thing. So I think like what Mr. Grossman was talking about is, I don't know if he was talking about while the case is under investigation, but maybe after the case has been done. Is that what, am I getting that wrong?
Okay, I'm not sure you're getting it wrong. My recollection is that, first of all, there are two kinds of sunshine matters that ethics is going to deal with. Number one, complaints that ethics gets directly from members of the public. Number two, and that is, we're not going to inject ourselves in that particular part of ethics proposed regulations. Where we're going to insert ourselves or inject ourselves is on matters referred sunshine complaints that where this task force has found a violation and referred the matter to ethics. And I believe that because that is already public record, I think Mr. Grossman's contention is it remains public record. It remains open.
So,
Member Johnson.
are you, Member Wolf, you're saying that if we issue a subpoena, your idea would be that then they would come back with justification for withholding. We wouldn't have to address that unless they did by saying it was confidential or whatever, they could redact it.
Well, Mr. Chair, it's my understanding when you serve a subpoena that it's to compel the production of either the witness or the documents, the paperwork. So if they're going to refuse at that point, then somebody has to show up and describe that, why they're
Okay.
doing that. But I think the contention for us, the thing for us is that we declare all documents under the umbrella of the City and County of San Francisco to be the people's documents. And if there's any content that is prohibited from being publicized, then that could be redacted. So, or there are cases where documents can be withheld, like in the case of RFPs. During the process of RFP, that's a closed system until it's awarded, and then all that information can come out. So the question becomes is in the case of investigations, whether the documents that are being used during the investigation, whether that is a public document or not at the time before the investigation is concluded. And I think that was the discussion between Member Snyder and Mr. Grossman. And that was the issue. What I'm saying is once this investigation is concluded and it's been kind of adjudicated, and all that should be public. All case files should be public, and there should be no prohibition.
Let me ask Member Wolf. I jotted down a suggested insertion here in the language. It would say the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force is authorized to issue issue subpoenas to compel testimony and evidence from parties in interest to and persons with knowledge regarding complaints filed with the task force.
That's fine. That's good.
Other
Persons with knowledge versus persons claiming knowledge.
with knowledge.
Correct. That's good. I like that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so that, and then the question of placing people under oath during testimony. Does that,
I would say continue that same thread, because then you're subpoenaing them, they show up, and you're going to put them under oath. So if you say person or persons with knowledge, then they're either going to claim they have the knowledge or they don't. But in any case, you want them to be under oath.
okay, are we comfortable with that? Okay, so that's a go.
We ask for public comment on that one.
Yes, we should. Is there any public comment on the question of subpoena power and placing persons under oath? Sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thomas Piccirillo. I do like the idea that the task force would have subpoena power. It's a little unclear, though, who would issue the subpoenas. Would you go to a judge to get the subpoena, or would the task force have a Sunshine Ordinance task force stamp with a subpoena to compel witnesses? So that, I have that concern. What the process of issuing a subpoena? You would do it sua sponte with a stamp from the task force, or you would get subpoenas by real judges? No, your own stamp. Okay. I do like the idea of you having subpoena power. There's just limits on what you're going to be available to subpoena. As to disclosability of your files, you certainly can assert the pending litigation claim, and then none of these files would be subject to disclosure until your matters have been adjudicated. So I don't think that would be a problem. Your files would not be discoverable by anybody until you finished adjudicating the matter in front of you, and then they would be subject to disclosure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us now to where we were. Member Washburn?
Member Costa has a question.
Oh, Member Costa.
Just a
Sorry.
very quick clarification, maybe from any of you. What would be sort of the criteria for subpoenaing something versus just the sort of blanket requirement that we're also proposing that a member or a respondent be present? Like what, seems like a subpoena has more strength, but is there a case where we wouldn't subpoena a member's presence?
Well, I would say that we would use the subpoena if a respondent proved uncooperative. In other words, if the respondent fails to show, if the respondent fails to produce evidence that might bolster his case, or if a complainant fails to produce evidence to bolster his case.
Okay.
I mean, we are here to promote sunshine, but we are also a quasi-adjudicative body here, and we have to be fair to all sides.
So it would be reactive.
That's my thought. Yes.
Okay.
Member Wolf?
Yeah, I would say that, when we end up with an extensive agenda of, 15 to 20 items, and half of them are continuances from previous meetings because respondents didn't show up, and then the complainants decide that they want their day and say, well, I'll go for a continuance, it just backs everything up. And then if those folks continue never to show up, it makes it difficult. You can't compel them. So the subpoena compels them to show up. And I think Mr. Pasquarella's interest in whether this comes from a judge or not, I mean, if it comes straight, the question is, if it comes from a judge, it looks, it's pretty official. If it comes from the task force, it's going to look official. Question is, will somebody tell them it's not as official as it should be? I mean, the question is, then you can file a real violation, because if they don't show up for and that's the other issue, is what is the consequence for having blown appearance or satisfaction of a subpoena. We don't have a provision for that.
Well, that's true, but again, that can be addressed, I think, in the proposed fines and penalties.
Okay. I'm just wondering if it sans or without a subpoena, it would be just part of the general violation of this or that part. If we then react and serve a subpoena and they then blow it, I mean, it should be an increase of.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Then that's a good reason to have the fees, the fines and fees section in there to describe it.
Now, in terms of where to put this particular language, I have suggested creating a new 67.30D. However, we could instead put it if we create the 67.39C, as has been suggested, we could add it to that.
Mhm.
Is everybody following me on that?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Are-
Member Johnson?
Do we know if you want to add that section at the end? Although, again, I like having the section at the end, but I also think that it's useful to have it contained within the definition of the task force so that people know where to find it instead of, it goes along with the, how a lot of times we have discussions and we talk about how people shouldn't have to have attorneys. It should be sort of a little more user-friendly than the traditional law. And I think having everything at an administrative hearings at the back separates it out a little bit. I think your suggestion of having it under 30D is good, that it's all in, it's contained all in one place. So when someone's reading about the task force or commission, it's all delineated in one place.
Okay, so you favor leaving it as 67.30D?
For now, yeah.
Okay.
If we,
That's fine. That takes us now to the question of complaint respondent attendance. And again, we have a number of options before us. We have what I have proposed in writing. We also have the question, the addition of 67.39C. We could do either or both of those, and also divide up 67.21E into subparagraphs. Member Washburn.
Well, I think we discussed this earlier, and you suggested, and I thought it was a good idea, that we have a provision, we have 6121E, while we break that section out, make it a separate section, but we also have something in the Article 2 regarding public meetings. And then we also, in Article 4, we have what's now, what used to be an amendment, 6739C, would have a different number now, and have that all in one place. And then, as Member Johnson suggested, for the subpoena power, and we could have that language back there too as well. Kind of Article 4 is our section on how we do things.
Okay. I kind of sense that there is a consensus here for, number one, adding 67.18. Number two, leaving the language of 67.21E intact and breaking it into some paragraphs. And number three, adding the language in what had been in our previous amendments package, adding the language in what had been 67.39C. Is that am I correct in that conjecture, in that guess?
I'm sorry, you're saying adding 6739C as 6718, or creating a whole new section
Well,
at
doing
6739?
in doing all three things. Number one,
Okay.
leave 67.21E intact and breaking it up into subparagraphs. Number two, adding 67.18. And number three, adding a 67.39C. Doing all three of those.
If we add an administrative section like that, then
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
That's, is that the will of the task force?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we have consensus there. Is there any public comment on the question of requiring attendance by complaint respondents?
Quite frankly, it's hard to follow the discussion, so I'll defer to your wisdom on this issue. Yeah.
Thank you. That takes us to broadcast requirements of meetings. I had a question on that going in. Member Johnson had proposed some language here. On packet page 9, under paragraph 4 of Member Johnson's proposal, new section 67.13F proposed during the work with former member Craven Green would require bodies enumerated in the charter to broadcast by 2012. What do we mean by broadcast? Are we talking about simply an audio broadcast or a video, a telecast? Are we talking about online audio or video streaming? What are we talking about here in terms of making it an actual requirement?
If you go to page 48 of our packet, that 6713F is on, that you guys had previously drafted is the first uncrossed out paragraph there.
Oh, on the government TV channel. Okay.
What page is that?
Page
48 of our packet.
48 of our packet.
And the only reason she had put 2012, but obviously maybe we might want to give them a little more time. I don't know when we intended to put this on the ballot. If it's November of 2011, 2012 might be too soon. So that's why I had suggested 2014. And then it says boards and commissions and other bodies enumerated in the charter, and that often becomes a point of contention for us. So I'm not sure, you could leave it that way just to clarify, that because it's similar to other things in the ordinance. I'm not sure how you would incorporate commissions and boards outside of them without actually naming them. But, I was thinking about how the rent board comes before us, or the library commission, and they don't, the library commission doesn't have the audio even. You have to request it. So, I don't know how we would incorporate them as maybe saying, other bodies that agree to follow the ordinance, or I don't even know if that's something you would want to do. But I think that broadcasting a broadcast requirement would definitely be useful in resolving some sunshine complaints before they get to us. And I also think that a lot of times people don't put it in the budget. And I think if we had a requirement, it would be a part of their budget. I don't think, even if we were not in hard times, I think they would keep saying, we don't have the budget.
When you say a revised deadline of 2014, do you mean calendar year 2014? Do you mean fiscal year 2013 or 13-14? What are we talking about here?
Well, I had not thought that out that far, but I was trying to amend the wording to recognize that 2012, it says shall by 2012 broadcast all meetings, and I was trying to recognize that may be.
Yeah. Or we could amend it to say within 6 months of the enactment of this ordinance.
I'm not sure what a reasonable time is, but perhaps Member Wolf could
Member
address
Wolf?
that.
Well, there's no reason why they can't do it today.
Oh, okay. But
If
maybe,
they have
so
the
maybe 6 months
capability.
is some morning time is reasonable time. So that's
Yeah, I mean,
6 months is okay with me. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, won't take them that long to ramp it up. I mean, for a room like this, they could put the cameras back.
Okay.
This room used to be full of cameras.
Okay.
So, it's really not, the issue is just the bodies, the boards and bodies and commissions that are enumerated in the charter. There's always a complaint that everything should be recorded. At least should be, if it's happening in this building, it should be videoed, audio and video. If it's happening outside the building, it should at least be digitally recorded. And that's been the contention of the public for many, many years.
Could we say boards and commissions and other bodies subject to the Sunshine Ordinance?
That would be a nice idea.
I mean, at least that would,
So you want to strike enumerated in the charter and replace that with subject to the Sunshine Ordinance.
yeah, whatever language, I don't know if it's under jurisdiction or subject to.
Sure.
What about passive meeting bodies?
Well, we'll need somebody to determine that.
I
already
would
been
also,
talking
well, I
about
would
that.
also, I guess maybe then I was going to suggest adding the name of the, specifically the name of the Ethics Commission here, but that won't even be necessary.
Right. That
So
would
we
be
could-
contained.
You could put enumerate, well, no, you're right, because subject to the Sunshine Ordinance covers enumerated in the charter too, so.
Exactly. There isn't anything that is not. I mean, there are some advisory bodies that are not, and there are some passive meeting bodies that are not. But you have to determine, the question of the passive meeting body is, you either have to determine like when you create it, that it's a passive meeting body. That's the time to determine whether it is or isn't, not 5 years or 10 years or 20 years later.
Last year, we spent a lot of time trying to define or to tighten up the definitions for public meetings and passive meetings, and I almost listed that because we worked so hard on it. I don't know if we feel we need to go back and look at what we did. We seemed to think it was important back then, although we kept thinking we were making things worse. I don't know.
One of the arguments that's been put forth is budget.
Oh, for passives?
Well, not just for passives, to require all boards and commissions under the jurisdiction of the ordinance to televise or even radio broadcast their meetings. One of the arguments against it has been budget. That they just don't have the budget to equip all the meeting rooms with that kind of equipment.
Well, then let's sunshine the inventory and find out.
I just think they'll always use that as an excuse, no
Right.
matter what the budget is. So I think that it's, it's not something that hasn't been brought up before. Supervisor Mercarimi, a year or two ago, created a gigantic list of all the ones that were not being broadcast and presented it to the board, and there was some discussion about some of them were actually required to be broadcast and still were not being broadcast.
Member Wolf?
I would just say, for instance, the mayor's youth commission gets to be broadcast. It's not enumerated. It's created by just the mayor's office. It's a pet, kind of a pet commission. So, you have those kinds of exceptions at the will of the mayor to have this or that, because they meet in a meeting room that has all the facilities. If you put somebody in a meeting room that has the facilities, it can be done. If you put them in a meeting room like this, which doesn't have the facilities, then it can't be done. So you remove all the facilities in this room, and you put those commissions or boards in this room, and then all you end up with is an audio recording.
Member Costa?
Do we have any sense of what the inventory looks like and what the capacity to outfit these sort of meeting rooms with?
No.
Okay.
Do we want to hold off on this one until we know, or do we want to?
I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I know that they have a lot of these cameras because at times they break and they got to have them, on standby. But at the same point, the question becomes is, what does the law require? It's not about what they can afford, what they can't afford. Is what does the law require? If we're not actually able to comply with the current law that's in place, then let's move on that instead of trying to create anything new. We can just try to invoke that. If we say that what we're suggesting here that it should just be, what we're saying here is what should already be in place. We're now expanding it to everything. But that, they could then say, their amendment can say, well, it would have to be okay, you have it here, all meetings held in City Hall. So I don't think that should be a problem. They just outfit these extra rooms. There's only got to be like 2 or 3 of these rooms that don't have, it's like got to be 406, 408, and the next one over. I think it's the only ones that don't have facilities.
So I detect the consensus then to include this in our new amendments package, am I right?
Yes.
Is there public comment on the question of requiring broadcasting of public meetings?
So the consensus was to include or exclude?
Include.
Include, okay. Yeah, I'm a big fan of publicizing all these hearings. But you don't really need an amendment to go to the voters to have your task force meetings broadcast. You probably just need to change your venue into a meeting room like where the Planning Commission meets, and they have the facilities already up in place.
It's to make everyone broadcast.
Pardon me?
It's to make everyone broadcast.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
The member of the audience is speaking.
Thank you for that comment. So you could actually use your sunshine ordinance now to compel all meetings to be televised if you were creative enough, I think. You can make a compelling argument that all meetings where there is the ability to broadcast should be broadcast, or it's not an open meeting. And, all commissions and boards don't meet at the same time, right? Most of them only meet once a month. So there's plenty of space, plenty of venues that have the ability right now to televise. So, I commend you for, you're putting in this, in your amendments language, but you may be giving the supervisors an excuse not to fund your ability to broadcast until this goes to the voters. If this is going to be presented to the voters, the supervisors have an easy out saying, well, then let the voters decide if they want the sunshine ordinance, the task force meetings to be broadcast. You should lobby them now and ask for a location or like the Planning Commission. Their meetings are televised. They do important things, but not any more important than open government. So if the Planning Commission is televised, the task force should be televised. You want to put it in your amendments, fine, but you're giving the supervisors an out and not budgeting your abilities to televise at the present time. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, Member Johnson, I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but you had a comment that...
I just wondered if Mr. Piccarello had misunderstood. I thought he had misunderstood what we said. I thought he had heard us only speaking only of broadcasting this board, and and I thought that it might make a difference as all, and if to broadcast all of the boards.
Okay, thank you. Just one other question on before we move forward. Do we want to leave in the language of, do we want to leave in 2014 as a deadline, or do we want to say within 6 months after enactment of this ordinance, or within a year? What's the pleasure of the task force? Member Washburn?
Why don't we say within 6 months, because we don't know when this is actually going to go before the voters.
Okay. Agreed? Okay. That takes us to documents, e-document storage, electronic document storage. And I believe it was Member Costa who raised that particular issue, and Member Wolf had some insights on it. I guess the question is, do we want to add or revise any language in the ordinance to make sure that this gets done?
Is this the centralized repository or this one, or the metadata?
No, this is the centralized repository.
Okay.
And storage of electronic documents. I think there are right now about 6 locations in the city where electronic documents are stored. And what the Department of Technology and the Committee on Information Technology are working on is consolidating them to 2 locations. That's my recollection. So, is this something that we want to legislate? What I'm thinking is perhaps Member Wolf and Member Costa could work on some language to propose in time for our next meeting, our next special meeting. I would like to have another special meeting on April 21st. I realize that's Passover week. But if there would be no objection to it, I'd like to have a meeting on that evening, same time, 5 p.m.
I can't promise, if it's,
That's 5
What-
weeks.
yeah, but if it's one of the first 2 days of Passover, I won't make it.
Okay. You don't have a calendar, do you, Mr. Ross?
No, I don't, Mr. Chair.
Hold
Okay.
on, I can-
If you want
can
one, I
look
can
it
go
up.
get one.
I can look it up.
Okay, we'll wait while Member Wolf looks it up.
Let's see. It starts on April 19th and continues through the 25th.
Okay,
So
so the-
19th and 20th
Okay, so the 21st would
would be fine.
be okay.
Yeah, it's the
All
third
right.
night.
Okay. Members Wolf and Costa, then would you be comfortable drafting some language for submission? And you could, what I would suggest is you have it submit it to the administrator by
14th.
April 14th, in
Okay.
order that it could be included in the information packet.
Sure,
Okay?
no problem.
And if I could make a suggestion, perhaps somebody like Kimo Crossman would be interested in participating in that.
Sure. And we'll also, if, query with Department of Technology where they're at with Sunshine currently in their plans.
That's fine. That's a good idea. Any other comments on this from the task force? Okay, and is there anybody in the audience who wishes to comment on this matter? Thank you. Okay. Electronic records reformatting. I have proposed some language on this. This would be on page 5 of our packet, listed as paragraph 3 in my missive. And what I would ask is if my recommendation seems to tackle the problem adequately, or if it does not, if there is anything here that should be changed in any way. Member Costa?
Well, I wonder if you could highlight some of the ways that seeing a document in its native format is particularly useful beyond it being searchable.
Well, there are some people who, when they look at a document, want to see how it's been revised during the course of its drafting.
Okay.
Track changes.
I see. Okay. Thanks.
That's metadata. So all the data that's hidden behind the scenes.
Okay.
And also making PDF searchable.
Yeah.
So you can't scan, unless the document is so old that all you have is hard copy. You know, the question then becomes, if you want to make it painstaking, then you'd have it transcribed, you know, and put into a searchable text document.
Member Johnson?
There's also, along that same lines with the PDFs, there was also a case before us with the Planning Commission where the Planning Commission provided PDFs of an enormous, like 1,000 emails. And the complainant contended that some of the to and from lines had been deleted. And this would help us resolve that kind of, you know, of issue.
Member Wolf?
Yeah, in the case of email, with regards to email formatting, as for reproduction, yeah, they are able to, you know, they can choose, you know, this email, this one, this one, hit print, and it'll print them all out into one like big file, but it's not delineated by page. It's not like one email per page. It kind of like is a stream, like it's as if it was, you know, like a roll of paper kind of thing. So is that what you're talking about, the formatting?
But they could provide email in its native format.
Are you talking about the headers of the email, or because the native format of email is electronic. It's
Right.
not in print form. So
But they provided it as PDFs, as
Because-
though they scanned. I don't know why, but as though they had scanned it in.
well, a PDF is electronic. Unless you print it, it's electronic. So that's what you're saying is you want the email. See, email is hard.
Well,
could-
in my work,
Yeah.
I review emails that have been produced to law firms in their native format, and they open in an Outlook.
Oh,
They-
okay. So they send you, kind of redirect or send you the original email.
When you don't get it in an email, but it opens, and when you open it, it opens with, well, in ours, it was Microsoft Outlook, but it opens with an email program instead of having to, I don't know if that costs more money, but,
Well, we can look into that. That's something that I'd be interested in, that to be able to preserve the entire email in its electronic format. And the only way I know of doing that is just to open all the headers up. That's what most people want to see, is the metadata in the headers.
you know, in fact, we have, I don't know anything about the software
Yeah.
that does it, so I honestly can't tell you that. But one of the issues, I know that it can be done, because one of the issues that comes up legally in our, you know, when we're reviewing it for substance, is that sometimes people forward it. So when you open it, instead of it being the original email, when you open it, it's the forwarding
Right.
of the legal requirement. So
Right.
the person that collected it is forwarding them, and we get those, and then we have to kind of break down whether that's, you know, is the person that forwarded it for the legal requirement necessarily a custodian of it, you know, in relation to the case. So I know that they're opening in an email format, but I could not tell you anything about software.
All right. It'd be nice to know what that software is, if it's like a separate piece of software. I can look for it.
Yep.
I could certainly
I can
track
ask,
it
but I
down.
don't know.
Sure.
Okay, now, again, I will bring up the language that I have proposed here on page 5 of the packet. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Where is it here? So,
Under recommendation, paragraph 3, recommendation.
yeah. in the wrong
Is there
place.
any, I don't have the letter from, the memo from the city attorney's office, but I remember there being something on, does anyone have it? I remember there being something about metadata. Are we going to take, are we concerned about that at this point, or are we just going to propose a language and go through the concerns of
the city attorney are you talking about Mr. Zarefsky?
Is that
You're
who
talking
that?
about, you're talking about the argument that Paul Zarefsky, the Paul Zarefsky memo?
Was it in Jerry Threet's memo? I can't remember if it was in here or not, but I know we've had discussions about whether metadata is producible or not.
But the question is if there's metadata with the original document,
Yeah, is that,
they must produce it.
okay, so we'll just,
They can't redact it, or they can't
so is that,
send it without it.
is that sentence that is proposed by a member, by Chair Need, metadata contained in an electronic document are officially deemed part of the public record? Is that in dispute in any way with the city attorney's office? That's my,
It has been. I think when people have asked for electronic records in their original format, and the respondents say, well, no, we're just going to give it to you in a PDF. And there was a few years ago a memorandum put out by Deputy City Attorney Paul Zarefsky, and basically what he says is that in their native format they may contain data or metadata that are not disclosable, that are exempt or prohibited from disclosure. And we don't buy that argument. We've never bought that argument. Our view is that metadata are like any other form of data, where there are metadata, portions of which are disclosable and portions of which are non-disclosable. They should be redacted or segregated, and the disclosable portion provided. And I believe the person who pointed out to us that metadata are editable is Kimo Crossman.
Right.
And he said the software is out there. You can get it for as cheap as $40, but it's
to
there.
edit it,
I'm sorry?
the software to edit it.
So editing software is available for as little as $40.
Yeah. If you
So-
want to add metadata to an existing document.
So if we agree to this language, further down the road, we'll have the discussion with the city attorney about what they think about
Well,
it.
since then, since the metadata, and this goes back to 2006, I think, there has been this significant amount of case law around metadata, and with regards to whether it's admissible or not, that kind of thing upon discovery. So I think the law is on our side with regards to what is inclusive of a document or not. If they feel, again, if they feel the content of any metadata is compromising and it's protected under law, they can redact it. Can't remove it. They can redact it. It must notate why.
And my language says, shall include the disclosable portions in the record provided to the requester unless such editing is provably impossible. I think that covers it.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Is there any public comment?
Well, but you're still giving the holder of the document the discretion of redacting or not redacting. So really, you're not going to get any, the public requester is not going to get any additional information by you having a provision that metadata is discoverable, but yet the responding entity can redact what they think is non-disclosable. So the other comment is this is going to go to the voters, so you want to keep it pretty simple, because if you start getting real technical in amendments to the ordinance, this is going to not pass. Voters have to understand what you're asking them to pass. And this is pretty technical stuff. But the underlying argument I'm making on this metadata stuff is the requester's not going to get any additional information the way this language is written, because you're still going to allow the holder of the data, the information, the discretion of redacting or not redacting. So they're probably not, they're going to probably redact it all, aren't they? So why have it? Thanks.
Thank you. Chair will note there's nobody else in the audience section, so public comment is closed.
Mr. Chair.
Member Wolf.
Just in response to the interest on this subject by a member of the public, I would just say that it's fairly easy to describe metadata. It's just hidden data. It's not viewable, and that we are compelling the city to produce that metadata when requested, when it's in all documents, available in all documents. And you keep using the word hidden or keywords like that, and we're talking about open government and transparency in government. That kind of people kind of get it. I think it depending upon how it's described. I agree. It would have to be described in a way that is very understandable.
Okay. Before we move on to the next portion, I'd like to take a 5-minute recess. We're back in session. Before we proceed on to the next item, a couple of task force members said that there were some additional considerations they wanted to raise regarding the electronic records reformatting issue. Member Costa, Member Wolf?
Want me to take it? Okay, so in your recommendation, I think we need to, let's see, members of the public have the right to view and receive copies electronic or in any format in which documents were produced or used in the context. And you could just add to the end of that sentence, and be searchable.
Okay, so members of the public have the right to view and receive copies of electronic documents in any format in which documents were produced or used in the conduct of the city's business.
What about receive searchable copies?
Should we receive searchable copies?
Yeah,
Is that,
That's fine too.
okay.
I mean, whatever the grammar should be so that it
Elec-
makes it inclusive. Sure.
But, or maybe, since you want them to be searchable electronically, you might want to say, and receive copies of electronically searchable documents?
Well, this is about electronic documents.
Okay,
So we'll just add the word searchable between receive and copies.
So are there
Member Washburn
situations?
has consternation.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, what about documents that, there's no way to make them searchable?
Well, if they're not searchable, then they're not searchable. You can't make them searchable, so they would be exempt.
That brings us to the suggestion I had about paper records being made electronic. And there could be many of those that couldn't be searchable. They'd have to be scanned. They never existed in electronic form.
Right.
So maybe we should make that delineation.
Well, that's one of the points around that is if you can scan a text document and have it be made searchable. You cannot scan an image and make the image searchable. Images are not searchable.
Well, yeah, by
Only-
definition, yeah.
Right. So, but in PDFs, if you scan in a document and you then convert it into a PDF, there are ways to retain the searchability of that text document versus making a PDF of an image.
You mean a text document that never existed in electronic form?
Right.
Like an old archival piece?
Right.
You could search it.
Absolutely. You
Oh, cool.
convert it using what's called an OCR, an optical character recognition software, which has been around for 20 years.
Yeah, that's right, the old.
Yeah,
scanning.
basically we used to use it with faxes. You need to turn a fax into a electronic document. That's how it was done. So you receive the fax electronically. It gets stored as what they call a TIFF file, TIFF file, and then you run that through an optical character reader. And there's all kinds of controls to deal with its resolution, how well it reads it, and then it converts into complete text, and you then just put it into like a Word document, some word processor. Save it. That's it. But the idea here is that if you had 600 pages, and a person said, you know what, I really don't need all the paper. I don't care to have all the paper. So they're not really interested in the original document, in the medium, the original medium, but they want the original information that's on it, and they want that searchable, then they can have that. The problem is that the reason why you want to say searchable is because you don't want them to scan it in as images. So you have 600 pages of something that's completely not searchable.
Yeah,
So instead of like a Word file, which is like .doc, you have an image file, which is like .jpeg, JPG, or .gif, or something like that, a GIF file or JPEG file, which is like a picture.
we don't want those.
We don't want that. We want them always to try to do their best to convert it into a searchable text file.
So I'm just asking if there's some way we can incorporate, the two types of documents, those that there's always been an electronic version of them, and those that are archival.
What I would suggest is we move on to, instead of, we had ticketed meeting minutes to be our next topic. However, right under that is paper to electronic information, or reproduction, and what I would suggest is reversing the two. So we can discuss paper to electronic reproduction now and meeting minutes afterward. So, Member Washburn, you had raised the issue of paper to electronic reproduction. And I believe in the task force has held in the past that this is really no different from getting a photocopy of a printed document. Some respondents have argued that it is different, that there's no requirement to transfer, there is no requirement in law to transfer a print document to electronic form. But we frankly don't see any difference between reproducing something electronically that's in print versus photocopying. All we're talking about here really is different media, and if somebody wants a copy of something, then they have a right to the copy, whether it's on a piece of copy paper or such a photocopy paper or on a CD. What I'm interested, let me see.
Was there text for this particular section?
No.
There was there was an amendment that was proposed before. It was going to be 67 point, it's on my
30.
list, yeah.
67.30B.
67.30B.
It's on page 92 of our packet, the amendment.
'92, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what's interesting is the document that our agenda is on is not searchable.
So, are we comfortable with the language in what would be the new 67.30B? Member Costa?
I would also ask that some language about searchability be inserted into this amendment.
It
And-
is.
Is it?
The last sentence.
Oh, okay. That it is searchable. Yes, okay, I'm comfortable.
Member Johnson?
I appreciate the need for it, but since we don't have, is there someplace we could insert it? Since we don't right now have a 6730B or a 6730?
I wonder if, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Member Wolf?
I'm wondering if there is not the section under like producible records in the current ordinance. Let's see here.
I mean, maybe it could be,
Like 6723.
since
No.
Chair Nees is adding language to 6721I, maybe for now we could make it J.
6721. There already
Makes-
is a J. JKL.
Or, okay,
Goes up
well,
to L.
make it
JK.
M?
J, whatever would be L, M, whatever
M.
would be most logical. And then if we decide to add amendments from your original amendments, we can always create that, because now 6730 is about the task force.
Right. Okay, so,
Actually, I would suggest that maybe it may be K and move K to L and L to M so that it's kind of in sequence. Because K is the release of documentary public information, whether inspection, blah, 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 shall be governed by Public Records Act, in particular is not addressed, blah, blah, blah. Maybe, no, that's not the right one. It's, What is documentary public information? What does the word documentary mean?
public information that's in document form.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Member Costa?
We crossed it out when we were.
I'm going to come back to the searchability issue really quickly. There is language in here saying it shall be searchable and electronically archivable. However, right now it's sort of what that's sort of characterizing is a document that exists only in hard copy. What about a document that exists in electronic format that's not searchable, that could be made searchable? I mean, in all seriousness, like, if you're dealing with a 600-page document that can easily be scanned into a searchable format, that should be available on request, I think.
Isn't that part of the point of what you were covering here, though, that they have the right to review and receive searchable copies of electronic documents in any format?
In the format that they would presumably exist, but there's nothing requiring their existence in that format.
Nothing requiring.
Their existence in a searchable format. So the Chair Nee's proposed amendment in 6721 is that members have a right to request a document in its native format, and that would be, in its native searchable format, right? And then this, whatever we're going to call this, would require that as documents that are only existing in hard copy they can be requested to be transferred to electronic format, that would be searchable, right? But what if there is a document that already exists in electronic format that is not searchable, that is a JPEG, right? That should be able to be requested to be transferred from its hard copy form into a searchable electronic form.
Member Wolf?
I don't know that the JPEG can be searchable.
Exactly, that's my
So,
point.
Okay.
But
so,
presumably, if there's a JPEG, there's also a hard copy. So that should be able to be requested to be transferred to a TIFF.
well, I think if you make an image into a TIFF, it still doesn't make it searchable. There's no text in it.
Right. My point is if there's a hard copy behind the JPEG.
Oh.
So say there's both a hard copy and a JPEG.
Oh, I see.
Chair Nee's proposed amendment is say somebody requests the most native form of that, they're going to get either a hard copy or a JPEG, right? I'm not sure which, or I guess it would be a JPEG. It's not searchable.
Well,
right.
I think in Chair Nee's original suggestion where he talks about native format, I mean, that would be the original hard copy.
And so my point is that that's not useful. What would be useful would be if.
Well, it may be useful to somebody. There may be something in a hard copy that's more useful than if it was an electronic. You get to see it on a piece of paper, and you can determine certain things that are going on a piece of paper that may have been doctored in electronic.
Sure, okay, so that case exists, but the case also exists where it's a really thick file, and I think that all I'm saying is that there should be language added that if there is a document that currently exists only in hard copy and JPEG, someone should be able to request for the hard copy to also be made into a searchable electronic format.
Oh, I see what you're saying. If they converted it into a JPEG file,
right,
that they should be able to go back and yes,
make searchable what has already been converted to electronic but is not searchable from the hard copy. Exactly what you said, yeah.
Is that technologically feasible, Member
Yeah,
Wolf?
yeah, it is. We're talking about text documents. We're not talking about, when he's talking about, all right, let me clarify. When you scan something in, as I mentioned before, you can scan them in one of two ways. You can either scan them in as a searchable document using this TIFF format, or you can scan them in as a picture, a JPEG format. If for some reason in the past they had taken a 600-page document and scanned it in and made it as a JPEG format, we're saying that they need, basically what Member Costa is saying is that the request, then, if the request is for a searchable document, they would have to go back, rescan that entire 600-page document, and then save it appropriately in the appropriate format so that it could be searchable.
Member Washburn?
Now, I'm wondering about the city's policy on archival data. Do you know that, or archive, old records, are there any plans to copy those and store them electronically and destroy the paper records? I'm just wondering if there's going to be old records that are going to be converted into some sort of electronic format that couldn't be searched, and then the original ones are gone. What do we have to say about that?
Through the chair, the only discussion I've heard about that, which is not really, hasn't come up on the COIT agenda just yet, is that it would be from a certain date forward. Anything from a certain date backward will remain in cold storage.
So on the question of the language on converting non-searchable to searchable, where would we like that? Would that be part of the amendment that former member Craven Green drafted? Would we want to make it part of 6721? Where is that going to go? I'm guessing where it would be the new, what would be, I guess, 67.21K, converting records to electronic format.
Is that this one that says B? What is this one?
It's on page
Yeah.
92, packet page
right.
92.
Okay, yeah, I would agree. I would agree that it should go there because the title of it is speaking directly to the activity we're asking.
Okay, so the added language then would say what?
If a document was was scanned as in unsearchable, in an insearchable or unsearchable format, it shall be reformatted upon request to a searchable format. Something like that. It's the least amount of words I can use to say it.
What if you added at the end something like that, where you said all electronic formats shall, as reasonably practicable, be made available in searchable form as if requested?
The last sentence you're saying?
You just make a whole new last sentence for that?
Oh, okay. See, electronic format shall, as reasonably practicable, be searchable. Actually, I think it should be in the sentence before because this second sentence is specifically about posting on the department or policy body's website. That's the directive. It would be in the first sentence.
So what's the proposed language now?
Transfer documents available. Transfer documents otherwise are. Okay, so in line 12, I would replace that with convert. The word transfer is not used. It's convert. Convert documents that are otherwise only available in hard copy, paper form into electronic format, and then I think after that, into a searchable electronic format. And then there needs to be another sentence that would say exactly what I had dictated. So that would be a third sentence in there.
Okay, so that sentence, then the first sentence would say, when responding to sunshine ordinance or public records requests, every department and policy body shall, if requested and if necessary, technology and equipment are available, convert documents that are otherwise only available in hard copy / paper form into a searchable electronic format. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then the sentence after that.
Before you go on, just for everybody's benefit, this is from original to first time making into electronic. Go
Yeah.
on.
Then the sentence after that would read, and I've edited it a little bit.
Sure.
Any document scanned in unsearchable format.
Converted.
Okay. Converted in unsearchable format?
Yes.
Okay. Any document.
Because they can do it in other ways than scanning.
Any document converted in unsearchable format shall be reformatted upon request to be searchable.
Shall be reconverted, right?
Reformatted.
Okay.
Well,
could-
we could say reconverted.
Yeah, you can say that. You can say reconverted and keep it consistent. It could, because they can retain the same. It means almost the same thing, but I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Sure. You can be consistent like that way.
Okay. I think that,
Can we put that baby to bed?
I think so. Is there public comment on this particular item? Okay. Seeing none, public comment is closed. That takes us to meeting minutes. This has been a very contentious topic, as I think all of you know, particularly I think Mr. Grossman has had some serious objections to the action minutes. I would suggest, however, that whatever we do, the clerk of the board is going to take a very close look at this. And I would ask at this point if Mr. Rustum, who takes our minutes, has any comments that he would like to make. We would certainly welcome them. Mr. Rustum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not have anything to say.
Okay. Mr. Rustum, have you seen the language that I have? There are a couple of possible sets of language revisions here that I have put forth. Have you had a chance to look at them? And if so, what are your feelings about them?
Mr. Chair, I did glance at them, but I did not dwell upon it.
Okay. From what you see in the language that is proposed here, do you see any major problems in terms of your workload or the workload of any other board or committee clerk charged with taking minutes and posting them?
No, I don't, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I would recommend, Mr. Rustum, that before the next meeting, the next special meeting, you might want to run this by Ms. Calvillo and Mr. Caldera, because I think that they would have a very, and any other staff person in that office who might have the responsibility of dealing with minutes. I think, ultimately, our responsibility here is to members of the public. At the same time, we have to be cognizant of any feasibility issues that might come up, and so any comments that members of the clerk's office, whether it's Ms. Calvillo, Mr. Caldera, Ms. Wong, anybody else, any concerns they have, we want to hear them. Okay?
I'll pass on your message.
Thank you very much. And I will now turn this over to the task force. I have put down some proposed language here. What's the feeling of the task force? Member Washburn.
I too feel very strongly about the minutes situation, and action minutes are fine. I mean, I think the action should be highlighted in the minutes, but there has to be some supporting information. And, you can argue that if that isn't there, then there isn't a record of the meeting that's really accessible to the public without having to go listen to lengthy tapes. So I've looked at, just glanced at both of, your suggestions, and I support them.
Well, I put these out as kind of alternatives. Obviously, we can't take both of them.
Right.
Member Washburn and any other member of the task force, is there either of these that you think would be preferable? Member Wolf?
Well, for me, what I'm not clear on is how many times the record gets repeated. So you have the complaint, and then you have the city attorney's kind of iteration of what was presented. That goes into the agenda, and then you have it repeated in the minutes, and then you have it. I mean, how many times does it get repeated that this is an issue? And so I kind of surmise that when we end up at the order, that's where it's really all laid out. And I'm wondering if that is not the place that you then just take the order and attach it.
Well,
Member Washburn?
that's fine for hearings, but we do a lot of other things, and we also we request and hear from members of the public. And we haven't been including, we used to include brief summaries of what they said. We aren't doing that anymore.
But that's required by law.
Well, we aren't doing it, though.
But it's required by law. If
It is,
if
but
it's not happening, then we need to not focus it on Chris, but we need to focus on the people
no,
that supervise Chris.
I'm not focusing on
Okay.
Chris at all.
Okay. So, but then we need to let the clerk know. That was the meeting that you and I had. So, and they agreed that they would continue to do that.
Okay, are you suggesting, Member Wolf, that no revision is needed to the language on minutes?
For me, I would prefer to have full minutes. Doesn't have to be verbatim, but it has to be the way we've had them. And it must include the paraphrasing of the public comment. That's already contained in the law.
So you're saying that the revisions I'm proposing here, suggesting here, are unnecessary?
Well, unless I would say yes, unless there's some compelling argument that I'm not picking up here. I may be missing something. I may be a little hypoglycemic and not don't have all my sugars in place.
Member Johnson?
I know we talked about adding the minutes listing the time of each matter started, but that's pretty particular to each board, like with the Board of Supervisors. you don't really need that because when you pull up the video, you can click on the agenda item and it goes directly to where the video starts. So you'd kind of be requiring, and there are other committees that do the same. But so that would be something that maybe if we included it and made everybody do it, we might truly be creating more work for a lot of commissions. Even, you know, it might be something that each individual board or commission could determine whether they need or not. Like for us, it would be excellent because if we're only going to do action minutes, because our audio, you can't really click on anything. You just have to try to figure out where it was. But a lot of them aren't like that. So requiring it in there might be a bit, you just add work for some of the secretaries. Like I'm thinking of like the MTA that can go on for a really long time.
Member Wolf?
The only way to do that is to do it by time code. And then you notate the time code in the area of the minutes in relation to where it is on the playback. And most playbacks will show the time code. And then you can just slide the slider to wherever it is. Or you can do other things with those things in the players. You can insert metadata that would end up being markers for where those items are. So when you're playing it back, you're looking at a actual playback software, and it'll be in there. And with the metadata in there, any assistive talk software would pick that up too. So you end up making it accessible at the same time.
But many of the commissions don't. You can just click on the agenda item and it will jump to it.
I know,
on
but
its
that's
own.
only for the video. That's not for audio. We're talking about audio only.
Okay.
So when for video, yes, and that is only producible or reproducible by SFG TV. Okay, through their software.
Okay.
Which is pretty much only available using Internet Explorer. It's not really even available in any other web browser because of they use Microsoft only product. So it makes it difficult to use on like Safari or for Mac or on whatever Linux-based program. Anyway, I digress. But so you can do that instead, create time codes and whatnot. And there are ways to do it so it's not painstaking for the person who needs to keep track of all of that. And they could do it on the fly during the meeting. You could have a little switch and it does that. There are ways to do it that way, have a computer set up, or you can actually mark it. You can actually have like the time code print, readout, and then wherever it is, they could just write down on a piece of paper for this particular item. This is where it is. There are many different ways to do this.
Okay.
So, with regards to that, I hear you. By the same token, the question becomes if a person who is seeing impaired, visually impaired, if they choose to have something printed in Braille, they would end up having the same problem as a person who has vision and is reading something on the same piece of paper. It's a matter of what the information that is being provided are we providing enough information? That's been the consternation of a lot of people, is that we're running it like a quasi-judicial thing. We need to have a record. There needs to be a real record that people can refer to, like you can look at it like in case law. So, and we need to be able to provide that in some way, shape, or form. Period.
Okay. Member Washburn?
I like the language you've added, Chair Nee, in the first of your recommendations. Towards the bottom, the minutes shall also list the time that the discussion of each matter started and shall include a summary of the position statements that members make on each matter considered at the meeting. I think that's something that's been missing from our action minutes, and I guess it's true for other bodies in the city, but it's part of, it reflects our thinking and is an important part of the record, that information. So I'm sure that there'll be people balking at it, but I think that's what we should aim for. And that those comments are not always reflected, for example, in orders of determination.
Mr. Chair.
Member Wolf?
It just kind of, just clarifying in my head, I think what's important for the minutes to do is, if somebody were to gloss over or read through the minutes pretty quickly, they want to get a gist of what's happened at the meeting, not just what was passed, okay? So if it's not the full transcript of what the entire meeting is at least a sufficient summary of what happened at the meeting, so that a judge or a lawyer or a member of the public that is needing it as reference for a complaint that they're bringing forward or what have you, they have the ability to be able to at least get the core information and what happened at that meeting. If they need more, then they can go to the transcript. I think that's kind of where I feel like my limit is.
So you then agree with Member Washburn that the language should be added, the minutes shall include a summary of the position statements that members make on each matter considered at the meeting?
I agree.
Okay. We have consensus then.
And we have the statement if they submit something in writing.
Is there public comment on the question of meeting minutes?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm a big fan of minutes. And clearly, for a variety of reasons, this task force is below the standard of best practices regarding minute keeping. I'm certain that it's, a budget consideration, but if you demand of this task force that the minutes be kept according to the law, then perhaps, the clerk's office and the Board of Supervisors would have a different discussion about whether or not you can afford to televise your proceedings. If there's going to be, additional expense in providing minutes pursuant to the law, then an alternative could be broadcasting your proceedings, and then the minutes wouldn't have to be so in-depth. One comment, I was in front of Rules Committee today, and in their minutes from the last meeting that took place a month ago, the minutes said, it listed 4 people, and then the minutes said they spoke on this matter. That was the extent of the minutes kept by the Rules Committee regarding an agenda item that took place a month ago. 4 names, and it said they spoke on this matter. Clearly, the public is not being advised of what's going on in Rules Committee, and that's something the task force shouldn't duplicate. Thank you.
Thank you. It is almost 8 o'clock, and Member Chan has indicated he has to leave by 8, so the chair will suggest that we terminate our discussions here. We have 4 items remaining, which we can tackle at our next special meeting on April 21st. And if any of the members or any member of the public have some comments they would like to include in the information packet on these 4 items, and those are the question of hiring an outside attorney, requirement response to disclosability, requirement response definitions also, overall definitions in the ordinance, and clearly defining the provisions when of justifying record withholding. Those are the 4 items we have left. If any of us have any comments that we want included in the membership packet, or in the next packet, information packet to go with the next agenda, they should be submitted to Mr. Rustum by April 14th. Mr. Rustum, you had a comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Am I going to create a new document using the existing ordinance, or am I going to use the amendments as we know as it is? Because if you go back to the 21E,
The existing ordinance. The existing ordinance is the basis now for what we're doing. So, for
but,
example,
Mr. Chair, you made a correction in 6730B, converting records to electronic format. That is one paragraph of an.
But it's just the language, not.
just the language, it would not be 67.30B. It would be added to, let me see, it would become, that particular language would become new section 67.21K.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, could you read the next item, please? Item number 3 on the agenda.
Can I ask one question?
Item number 3.
Hang
Sorry,
on.
Chris.
Member Johnson.
Is the goal, just today, is our goal still potentially to have this on the November ballot?
That's the current thinking.
Thank you.
Call item 3, please.
Item number 3 is announcements, questions, and future agenda items from task force members.
Any members? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.